Thank you, Chairman Van Hollen, and welcome again, Chair Rosenworcel. We've talked about national security before. I'd like to talk with you about it again today. We all know that Chinese technology is a threat, not only to the federal government, but to private industry here in America. And the FCC's covered list effectively bans the sale, bans the use, and the importation of certain communications equipment and services. I think it's a very potent tool. One of the things, and you and I've touched on this before, is it seems that the list is quite narrow. And so just as an opening question, I'd like to ask you, is the Commission being deliberately cautious here, or is there something that's holding you back?
That's a really good question, Senator. The covered list is a list of equipment that our nation's national security authorities have found to be insecure. And as a result, it cannot be used for any FCC expenditure. So if you get money from us to help you build your network, you cannot use it to purchase any of that equipment. We update it from time to time, but we only are permitted under the law to update it if national security authorities identify additional companies. And so, on a fairly regular basis, we reach out to those national security authorities enumerated in the law, like the FBI, like the Department of Justice, like the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, and ask for updates. And recently, we even wrote them with the names of 2 companies that had been brought to our attention by some members of the House of Representatives and asked for their assessment on it. So if I could ask you to do one thing, it would be to make sure that those national security authorities get back to us and help us keep that list up to date.
That's a very helpful suggestion, and I think our work right here on the Appropriations Committee, we may be able to help in that regard. Staying on this, the covered list, what would be the implications of a more extensive list, even a retroactive list? How would that help you utilize the covered list to the fullest extent?
Well, the covered list has other values, too. I just want to acknowledge that when we publicly produce a list of equipment that we believe is insecure, that the government won't support, we're also telling the private sector, this isn't stuff you should be buying or using.
It's an important message.
And we are also telling the global economy that we don't trust this equipment. So I do want to acknowledge that that list has power beyond just the FCC and our immediate programs. I think it's narrow because our national security authorities are careful, which is appropriate, but I also think we can't let this list wither. We need to update it from time to time, and reaching out to them regularly as we do has been useful, but of course, you also pointing out that this should be a priority would be helpful as well.
And to amplify the point you just made, when I was serving in a previous role as United States Ambassador to Japan, the 3rd largest economy in the world, we were able to get them to block untrusted carriers because of what had happened here, our ability to point to that, and the example that we set, as you say, can have repercussions around the world. So thanks for that continuation.
Absolutely. That's absolutely correct.
The strength of the covered list rests with the Commission's Equipment Authorization Program, and that predates the covered list. And my question is, if you had the Equipment Authorization Program, are there other FCC programs that are already in place that might serve as a foundation for addressing national security concerns beyond the covered list?
We've been exploring what kind of certifications might be necessary from applicants before the FCC. Mm-hmm. For instance, if you are about to bid in a spectrum auction in the future, should you certify that none of your funding comes from countries whose revenues and governments we have concerns about? Mm-hmm. We've also been exploring whether or not when we give you an authorization to participate in our economy, what kind of national security questions we should ask at the outset, including what equipments might be used in your networks and what kind of managed services you might get from some foreign provided companies. So we're looking across the board for other points to create opportunities for certification to make sure that networks in this country are secure.
Well, as you think about the national security ramifications of what you do, and I'm sure you do this every day, know that our staff stands ready to work with you, and that I would be very interested in any thoughts that you might have in terms of looking at existing authorities mm-hmm. and new ways to utilize those. And frankly, if there's any way we can support you in that, or if you need our support, letting us know. Very quickly, I'd like to turn to the satellite industry. It's growing. It has an incredibly important role in communications. The creation of the Space Bureau is intended to align the Commission's resources with its responsibilities. And I just wanted to get an update from you what the current status of the Space Bureau is, how you're going to know if the reorganization that you're undertaking is a success, how will you measure that?
Sure. First of all, I want to thank this subcommittee for supporting this reorganization. When I got to the agency and I saw the backlog we had of satellite applications, I felt that we had to reorganize to address them more rapidly. Just this week, the agency will be voting on an effort to streamline the application process. We also have a transparency initiative. And then globally, we're leading with what I call the single network future, because we're trying to develop a framework for figuring out how terrestrial wireless services can combine with new satellite services in the phones in our pockets and the devices on the ground. So I think we're actually making great strides. The challenge now is to continue and to hire people who can help us with all the applications we have before us.
And I would think you'll find great opportunities as well for cost savings when you think about your connectivity objectives as well, utilizing this, as you called it, the single network approach. Future. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.